the idea is to ask people the same question, and it's almost like it's a scientific experiment because all our classmates were in a fairly similar situation. Most of us came from a Catholic school,
Right.
mostly from a large Catholic family, mostly with one, sometimes two. I probably usually two Catholic parents because those are the people. So we had the starting point was pretty similar, and then the gun goes off, and 40 years later, everybody's done all these different things. And
Right.
so the question is, how were you Catholic? How were you Catholic back then?
Mm-hmm.
What were your practices? What were your beliefs? What was your worldview? And then how is it now? And then the key thing is, why did it change in your opinion? And there's no right or wrong answers. And what I'm trying to develop is many very, very different stories, totally different. And so probably the selection process is, what is interesting. But if there were two stories that were both interesting and they were exactly the same, I'd probably opt for one that was a little bit
little different.
It teaches a lot of about life. So that's the price. So I have people start out with, turn back the clock. As a kid, what was your family like as far as were your parents Catholic? You have brothers and sisters?
I have one sister, and she's 2 years younger. We're both adopted, and yeah, both the parents were Catholic, but really weren't. Didn't really recall us being practicing Catholics until we started going to Catholic grade school. We went to St. Justin Martyr in Anaheim, and so it was then that we first started really going to church. And I remember it was my sister more than anybody else that kept, she's 5 years old and kept kind of reminding everyone. At first, just like to say grace. Oh, yeah, we got to say grace. And then it was, going to church. So, and, I went to St. Justin for 8 years. And I think everybody got, most of us seem to have the same kind of upbringing because of that, with the Catholic upbringing and catechism and all that. And but mostly for me, I remember just I was always confused by the whole process, and I found it to be kind of a pain in the butt more than anything else. I didn't really like going to church. But that was more just a little boy not wanting to sit still and all that stuff. Most of us, I think, were like that. And but more than anything, during a lot of that time, and I was trying to think about this since we talked about this, was most of it, I think, for me was kind of fear-based. The way the teachings were, if you don't do this, this is going to happen, and you're bad, and there's sins, and so I'm kind of afraid of God. I was afraid of the whole thing. I was afraid of the priests, and they were very scary. They meted out punishment, and ended up catching a lot of it for one reason or another in grade school. Not obviously not because of religious beliefs, but just of being a problem child in the eyes of the nuns. And as far as grade school goes, and I tell people, and they kind of look at me, I said I got a good education. I made really good friends, some that are still lifelong friends, like Rick Julian. But when I look back on it, I almost think of it as like being in prison. I felt it because it was so rigid and so confining that I always kind of would joke that when I was released from Catholic prison, that was it. So, that's where grade school ended up with me. So, I don't know, where do we go from here now? What's the deal?
Your parents were both Catholic now, and you mentioned what was your younger sister's name?
Camilla, Cammy. Yeah.
Cammy.
Yeah.
So she was kind of the driving force, kind of the motivator, or at least the
reminder. At least early, the reminder, the conscience.
But
yeah.
Were your parents, would you consider them active or what's the word, pious Catholics, observant Catholics, or how is it, what do you think their beliefs or practices?
Well, I don't know how, not really observant. I mean, they were lifelong Catholics. They grew up Catholic. My dad comes from a large Italian family, so they had, they were definitely Catholic. And so we had the beliefs, but we weren't really driven by it. There wasn't really any prayers. We'd say grace. That was about it. And Sunday, a lot of the times, even my mom wouldn't go to church, so my dad would take the two of us, and it was just something that we had to do. I'm not being very observant back then. I really didn't observe how pious my father was, but he was really more, I think, more from the Catholic viewpoint, from an Italian viewpoint, was more of a staunch, or I don't know, that's the word, more of a traditional Catholic, I guess.
Did you, as far as were you an altar boy?
I was an altar boy. I got kicked out of altar boys, though.
You mentioned you got in trouble. It was. Why did you get in trouble? Or what? Do you think you deserved to get in trouble, or they're just being picky? What was the dynamic there?
I was just goofing off. I was just one of those ones that was goofing off. I had a friend there, Terry Huff. The two of us would get each other in trouble. We just were like, we were those two buddies that were always causing each other to get in trouble. My grades were okay when I would apply myself, but for the most part, it was just that I was always goofing off. So, and I would, I was even unaware of it. All of a sudden, there'd be a teacher there. What? That kind of thing. So,
do you remember in terms of like First Communion or confirmation, or just what was your take on that?
I don't remember First Communion at all. I really don't think I have no recollection of it, to be honest. Confirmation, yeah. By then, it was weird because I think seventh, eighth grade, I started to get to really, understand the concept of Christianity and Catholicism. And at the same time, I started to really question it. But I kind of got the ritual. And for some reason, the whole confirmation concept, the whole going through that whole thing was, to me, it was interesting. I really did kind of enjoy that, to be honest about it. I don't know why, but it was more of the ritual. It was the understanding of what you're doing finally, and having a, I guess that would be a deeper understanding of what this was for and why. So,
what was your concept of Catholic faith at that point?
It's all faith based, and I had a real problem with believing in something that I couldn't understand or couldn't see. So I had I understood that the Pope was the head of the church, and that his words were, and his direction came directly from God, and that his word and his actions were infallible. And I kind of thought, okay, all right. So I didn't have a problem with those basic tenets of Catholicism. What I had a problem with, which is the basic faith of Christianity, is all about the resurrection. To be honest about it, to me I just never got that concept, and I had a few ill-advised discussions with the nuns and priests about that time, where things didn't really go well. So after that, I pretty much just kept my views and my questions to myself.
So tell me how that kind of put yourself back into
Archie, leave
that time, and if you can kind of remember exactly what went down, and that would be what went on in those discussions. What was your viewpoint? What were their answers?
Well, my viewpoint was that I just couldn't. I didn't get the whole Christ, the Jesus Christ story, from the Immaculate Conception all the way into the resurrection. I just couldn't get it. It just didn't make sense to me. And it didn't make sense, then I couldn't believe it. And their answer was always, but you have to believe it. That's called faith, is believing in something that you can't know, that you can't see, that you can't feel. that you can't understand, but believing in it anyway. And that just never,
Solve the problem.
yeah, there's some things and as we get older, we understand that things ring true and other things that don't, and that never rang true to me. So, and to be honest, it still doesn't. So
they gave you the answer, basically, believe it, have
Yeah.
faith. And what
Right.
did you respond to that? Did you say, what did you have an answer to that?
I don't think so. I don't even think I did. What the problem was that just bringing that subject up to, and it was the 8th grade, and then his name I cannot remember, our teacher. That's another thing. A lot of these things they're gone. I've deleted. And she took me to, because of that, had me go speak with Father O'Connor about it. Father O'Connor was, at St. Justin, was this big, red-headed, scary priest who used to beat on me sometimes basically for grades. And so going to in his presence and trying to explain this to him was terrifying. And but he didn't take it well either. So I had some punishment, some prayers, and a bunch of stuff that just was not pleasant. So
you had punishments for questioning, having these questions?
Yeah.
What did you think of that?
Well, like a lot of things I made decisions on when I was young, it was that, that's not going to happen again. So it wasn't that I changed my belief. It was just that I wasn't going to voice that to anybody again.
Do you remember what the punishments were?
Yeah, there was a lot of prayers. I had to write, what was it? I had to write the creed. What do they call that?
The Nicene Creed.
Yeah,
Apostles' Creed.
right, the Apostles' Creed. And then I had to kneel for a half hour in front of the Virgin Mary, which wasn't very fun.
So did that increase your faith, that whole exercise?
Yeah, no.
But you did it. Actually, you went through this whole
I did
penitential thing.
Yeah, because I did, as far as I'm concerned, never had a choice. In the past, I had that same priest had paddled me and actually kicked me. He had bend over and grab your ankles. He booted me across the front of the classroom because of my grades in what was that? 4th grade, maybe, I think it was.
So how bad were your grades that you deserved the paddling? Do you remember?
It was all the conduct. I'm trying to remember the report card we got. It had all the academic grades on the one side, and the other side it had conduct,
effort.
Yeah, effort, and I think there were 3, weren't there? Yeah, I think so. And I got U's in all of those, which is unsatisfactory. That was the lowest you could get. So.
Did anybody else get in 4th grade get paddled?
Yes, there were several of us. My friend Terry Huff, he also.
Did you get it?
No, Rick didn't get it.
Damn.
I don't remember Rick getting it. No.
So was that? I mean, there's the physical. I got swats at Survey, so I know that hurts. But was there a shame element at that age? Was that embarrassing, or in front of your classmates, or was you didn't?
When I think back, I think it was a little embarrassing, but as long as my buddy was going through it with me, it wasn't such a bad deal. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it was kind of embarrassing. It was. I don't think it was so embarrassing about in front of the class. It was the fact that the priest, that for some reason it was about with the priest. I don't know why. That's what was embarrassing.
How did this go down with your parents? All this stuff.
I never told them. They didn't even know any of that was going on. They never knew. I never
Probably
told
still
them.
don't know.
No. I found, and that was one of the other decisions. I just never started telling never shared anything with my parents about school or about religion.
Did you ever have discussions with your sister about religious items?
No,
Just kind of
not really.
Soul kept it inside, I guess.
Yeah, and she's my sister. She 2 years younger. It's like she didn't exist most of the time.
So then you went to Survey. So then, how was that?
Well, for one, being out of St. Justin, it was like freedom, for one thing, and we just were treated differently by the instructors there. So for me, it really was a way to just really feel free to just learn and understand. But at that time, I was just totally shut down on standard Catholicism at the time. We'd have to do how we'd have to do Station of the Cross and all that. And I hated those 3 days. And
This is at Servite?
no, I'm talking about before Servite. So then at Servite, it was all of a sudden you had a choice whether you wanted to do it or not. And it was like, really? I have a choice? Okay, I choose not to. So so that was kind of how things were. I'm trying to remember the religion classes that we had there, and the one that really I remember the most was Father Duplessis, and we talked about the concept of a literal interpretation of the Bible versus I can't remember the word, but it's like a logical interpretation of the Bible. How the Bible was written at a certain time, how you had to look at how people lived back then, and that made a big difference for me. I started to look at religion in a different way because of that, because I could say, oh, okay, that's why they said that, and yet people want you to take it literally, and so that kind of gave me. I don't know if he was trying to make us understand that Catholicism was a living thing. It wasn't rigid, but to me, I just kind of said, okay, I can pretty much discount all of it. So that's kind of where I went from there. So that's that's pretty much it. I didn't. Obviously, I wasn't an altar boy anymore. I never went to any of the services at Servite. I think I went maybe once or twice. I can't remember why. No. In the chapel. And really, that's about it. I tried to stay away from as much as possible. And as we got older and went into high school, there was less and less Sunday attendance too. So we still would go, but it wasn't every Sunday. So.
Were you still living in your parents' house? Did you get any flack from your parents if you just decided not to go to Mass on Sunday?
No, because they didn't go either.
At that point,
yeah.
Or your sister?
Yeah, or my sister. My sister would go sometimes, and then she went to Rosary. And when she went to Rosary, she kind of had the same things. Kind of like all of a sudden, we got out of that really rigid environment, and she didn't have to. I guess it changed for her too. She wasn't the conscience of the family anymore as far as Catholicism.
So it sounds like what happens. A lot of people go to college. A lot of people are pretty observant during high school because they're still in their parents' house. But when they go to college, don't have that supervision, and they kind of do what they want to do, and they don't. So, but that happened to you actually in high school.
Yeah, it happened in high school. Yeah, I mean we did go, but not all the time, and it was never a real issue. Like, it got to a point where. See how he likes to be on your feet. Yeah. He, a dog person when you see one, don't you, Archer? But it got to a point then when, like when I was driving and all, finally, it was like, yeah, I'll go. And then I wouldn't, because at that point they weren't like waking us up at 7 a.m, let's go to church. So,
as far as you mentioned, the fear factor, was that gone? I mean, did you just kind of put it to how did that play out in high school?
It was pretty gone, I think. Or I put it away.
You weren't afraid you're going to hell because you missed Mass on Sunday?
I don't know. If it was more than anything, it'd be more. I was going to go to hell because I was masturbating. I was doing things that were horrible against like everybody, but so I was like, I think I turned it more from fear to guilt. It was more of a guilt thing. It started to create a sense of guilt, but not fear. I was just like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. But it wasn't like I shouldn't have done that because now I'm going to go to hell. It was just, I guess I shouldn't have done that.
Just guilt, just that bad feeling that you've done wrong.
Yeah, it's that guilt thing. Yeah. So.
Okay, so that was high school. Well, everybody's been there.
Oh my God, what am I doing?
So then college came. Where'd you go to college, and how did that go?
I just went locally to JC to Cypress College. So, well, by then it was totally gone. It was like religion didn't exist. It just wasn't part of my existence at all. It wasn't in my consciousness. Just, I went to weddings and funerals. That was basically it. More weddings back then, obviously, more weddings and funerals, but there's still a couple funerals too. But that was the only times I was in church.
During a wedding or a funeral, kind of meaningful time and stuff, did you start having these associations or any kind of religious thoughts at that point, or was just you were there as a guest and that was it?
No, I was there. I would have thoughts, and it was more like, God, this is such bullshit. I mean, really, that was what I was there, and like at a funeral, it'd be talking about how the prayers are, receive this soul into your care and all that stuff, and I would just think, yeah, right. And with the wedding, the same thing, in the sight of God, we're here to do this, and saying, no, we're not. We're in this building, but that's about it. To me, that's what it was. It was a total rejection, I guess, at that point. But it was never conscious except when I was in that building.
You were faced with...
Yeah.
And then the other times it was out of your mind?
Yeah, it was just completely out of my mind, yeah.
So then after college, now were you dating? Did you marry? Or what
went
on there socially there?
Well, yeah, I was dating a lot. And I got married when I was 24 to a non-Catholic girl. But it's weird because at that point, I still had I still called myself a Catholic. I still had some vestiges of it. And even as I'm saying, I rejected that stuff, it still was like we were going to get married in the church. And that's just because that's what you did. And so, I think about like what I'm saying in college, and at the same time, there would be, when we decided we were going to get married, there was like no, I didn't say, I'm not getting married. Church. I said, no, yeah, we'll get married in the church. Yeah, we'll have Father Galley marry us. Yeah, okay. So it was like, what would it be? Convenient Catholicism. It was at that point it was convenient to be a Catholic, so I did. But at the same time, and when we were getting married and we're on those kneelers and Father Galley is praying over us, I'm just thinking, this is why. This is just a waste of, this doesn't make any sense to me. So, but we had to go because my wife wasn't Catholic. We had to go to
instruction. Yeah,
whatever they call that. Yeah, and I know it's different in each parish and all that. We had one group session and then a couple meetings with one of the priests there. Thank God, who wasn't. I don't know who he was, but he wasn't the dreaded Father O'Neill. There was no way if he was the one that was going to be our counselor at St. Justin that I would have done it. Period. So yeah, we did that and got married, and then never went to church. Never did anything after that. So do you remember any of the concepts, or how did it go as far as the counseling instruction part? Do you have any memories of that? Yeah, I do, and I thought that it was valuable because it wasn't, obviously it was faith-based, but it was more about relationship, and so that made sense. It could have been anybody telling me that stuff other than a priest, but it was just about relationships, about, how to deal with this person and things that I really hadn't even thought, hey, let's get married. I guess we should get married. We've been having sex for a couple of years. I guess we should get married. How did it go over with your wife to do this Catholic instruction and be married in the Catholic Church? What was her view on that? Gosh, she didn't seem to have much of a problem with it because they were not religious at all. I think they were, I don't know what their background was from Pennsylvania, They're Christian, but they had Christian beliefs, but they weren't practicing. So
you just kind of going along.
Yeah, I just went along with it. Yeah, I just had no problem
think
with it.
real hard about what it was. What was the driving force for you to be married in the Catholic Church?
Yeah, that's a hard one, because I hadn't even thought of it until you asked it. It's been so long. I think it was that it was just the proper thing to do. That for some reason it was the proper thing to do. I don't know why. But it just seemed like, that would be a good thing. And I know that, like, from the priests at Servite, that I understood from them, from relating with them, that all priests weren't scary, totalitarian, Irish, crazy Irishmen, like the two that Father O'Connor and Father O'Neill at St. Justin. So I came to respect them as religious people. So I had a respect for them. I would still kind of, for whatever reason, like I said, when we'd be in the middle of a service where it just wasn't connecting. But I had a respect for the priests. I had respect for their belief. And so maybe it was part of that I just had, it was showing respect for the church and for my parents. And for, it's hard to describe. And one thing in aside is that even though, I have these, most of the memories or the feelings from grade school are kind of, they're not real pleasant, a lot of them. I still have a soft spot in my heart for nuns. Whenever I see them, I always kind of, and yet I had nightmares about them as a kid.
You talked about the priest thing. What was going on as far as the nuns go that was gives you bad memories?
Same thing, discipline. I got a lot of pointers and a lot of rulers. I got a lot of pointers over my butt and a lot of rulers on my hands. And so that was part of it. But I remember though, like as I got older, the 7th and 8th grade, the two nuns, 7th grade, Sister Paula was an older lady who had led a secular life and then joined the convent later, who made a real impression on me, because she just would talk about things, about life, and it wasn't as rigid as these other nuns were. And then the one in 8th grade, whose name I cannot remember, who was very young. She was still so young, I think, about it. She didn't have a lot of those old iron-bound concepts that some of the other ones did early on. So those two, for some reason, I think I had a better feeling about them as I was getting older too. So I don't know.
So this kind of fondness or this feeling for so that there were some good nuns. Is that your
yeah.
Wasn't all. Yeah. So then you're married and and so it hadn't changed anything, I guess, as far as, you did the marriage through the Catholic Church. That was pretty much life as usual.
Right. Yeah. Again, I never went to church. Pretty much, like I said, just put all of that out of my mind. The only time it would come into my mind was a wedding or a funeral, and that were the only times I would ever go to church. I never thought I should go, and that I needed to go, that I needed to pray, that I needed to talk to God, that I needed to do any of that stuff. It just didn't exist.
Did you ever have a personal prayer life as a child or in high school, or was that ever, you talked about grace and the Mass and stations, of these are all kind of formal things, but did you ever at any point have kind of like this one-on-one communication thing?
No. I remember trying to pray, not really getting anything out of it. Thought, well, this is not stupid, but it's not. This isn't getting me anywhere. And I think too at the time, I'm not sure, just my own as my own learning experiences, and I still do a lot of reading. You read things that don't have a Catholic basis to them, and you start seeing how other people think about religion. And so a lot of that, I think, was where I was finding my direction, is that it was that a lot of this is meaningless. So, and and in high school, there's so much teenage angst going on anyway, and I never thought to turn to my religion or to pray about it. So
you weren't one in time of crisis to go
no
lighting candles or doing
no
novenas or any of that?
No, I just no.
So you're married. So bring me up to date in terms of where you were living, what the career things were happening. Did you have kids? What that family stuff?
Well, that was my first wife, and we tried having kids, and she had several miscarriages, and so that didn't. And that kind of stopped the marriage. We'd been married for 7 years, and like a lot of people, you start. I was a photographer. I got a good job working in a commercial studio. She worked for Bank of America. So we had a steady, modest income, and we bought it at one point. We did end up buying a condo, and so we had all the things. We had we were ticking off the boxes, and so one of the ones we didn't have yet was a kid, was a child, and again it was more like she wanted a child. I'm like, okay, I guess it's time to have a kid. Just kind of like the same thing. So I guess it's time to get married. And we couldn't, and that really kind of stopped the marriage. It was all of a sudden, it was like, well, now what? And so the marriage dissolved after 7 years. At the end of 7 years.
You say dissolved. Did you go through the Catholic annulment thing?
No. No. Again, see, that didn't even exist. That didn't even enter my mind.
Yeah. I didn't think that it would. But for some people, that's a big issue.
Yeah.
So and then was that in Orange County? Were you living in Orange?
Yes, you're living in Yorba Linda. Yeah, I've been in Yorba Linda since.
So then what happened?
1980. Then I was just I was free, kind of. I was in my early 30s, and I just kind of partied my way for a few years. So yeah, and through that I also had. I had the divorce, and then I had a bout with cancer. I had thyroid cancer, and so that kind of shook my world. But it didn't push me towards religion. It didn't push me towards God. It just pushed me. It just made me look at things that life is very unpredictable, and so I went along with the unpredictability of it. And so I was out. I was just out there, still working good, making lots of money, and partying really hard for a few years.
As a single person.
Yeah, as a single guy. Yeah.
Did you hang out with any Servite guys at that point in your life, or was it a different group altogether?
It was kind of a different group. I'd see Rick Julian a lot, still, because we were close. But my other friends, Randy DeMure and Rick Jones, had moved to Northern California, and Mike Freeman had moved to San Diego. So, I didn't see a lot of them. Not much.
Okay. So now, did you have any other? You mentioned a little bit about other spiritual books or traditions or whatever at that time, with the thyroid or not even necessarily. Were there influences that were going on? Were you thinking things or reading things, or did you have any connection with other religious spiritual people at that point? No.
At that point, I don't know what my influences were, to be honest. I can't recall going, oh yeah. It's just reading things where a character in a book would talk of different beliefs or of no beliefs. And I started just forming things on my own about that. I believed in God, but I didn't really believe in the basic tenet of Christianity. So,
which was the basic tenet was?
For me, that people is the resurrection of Christ. Basically, the whole Christ story, the way it's portrayed.
And then also, as far as life after life after death as far as
Nobody knows.
me. Okay.
Yeah.
So it wasn't necessary that there's a. Did you believe there was an afterlife at that point?
I didn't. I did not believe that there was. I didn't not believe either. It was just one of those ideas where nobody knows until you get there, and so nobody that's here can tell me that there is because they don't know. So don't tell me there is because you don't know. So yeah, and I started to form a few things because, and one of the basics is still that about, and I can't remember where I read it. It's just about the kingdom. It might have been watching a movie, but always about the kingdom of heaven. Christ would talk about the kingdom of heaven and how the concept. I think I even got this back in with Servite with Father Duplessis about a literal interpretation of the Bible. Was that everyone assumes that the kingdom of heaven, especially back then, when what they knew of kingdoms was the Roman oppression, was that it was this place somewhere other than where they were, with armies and soldiers and swords and battlements and all the things that those people 2,000 years ago thought of as a kingdom. And I always thought that was so far off that, to me, and I remember just kind of making this distinction myself, is that the kingdom of heaven, the way I read that, the way I remember seeing that in that movie or whatever, was that the kingdom of heaven is here, is inside me. It's not out there somewhere. And so that was kind of my belief that and still is that when you read passages, and I don't know, I'm not a scholar, so I don't know. I'm just remembering what I think is that the kingdom of heaven, when they talk about that, everyone thinks of it as being somewhere out there, when I think it's somewhere in here. So that was kind of where I was at, but it was just so it had no power for me. So it wasn't a factor, and I wasn't meeting any good Catholic girls back then either. So
were you looking? Were you actively looking?
No.
Why not? Why or why not?
Well, having just got out of a marriage, it was like that was the last thing I wanted to look at, was somebody that was looking to get married. And of course, a lot of people I was meeting back then, again in my early 30s, were other women who had been recently divorced, and were looking for someone else, or hadn't been married yet and were looking to get married, and it was like, this ain't happening.
So then what happened?
So then what happened? Stumbled around for a few more years, and then I met Janet. I met Janet at a nightclub. She was just out having fun with her girlfriends, and I was out with my friend, and we just hit it off, and I called her back, and we started dating, and we started having some little philosophical conversations, and she had been raised as a not super strict, kind of the same kind of a background, only was Seventh-day Adventist in the Central Valley. So they're they're really strict about stuff. And she went to an SDA school, but her parents weren't really rigid. So they got the basic teachings, but that's it. So she had a lot of questions about religion and spirituality too. And she had met someone else, a friend of hers, who had sent her to a couple that were doing personal improvement, personal empowerment kind of workshops and exploration. And so she had some of that. We started having conversations, and the things that I was telling her, which I was kind of like I was telling you, made sense to her, and what she was telling me made sense to me. And so again, it more reinforced my belief about that, belief in a higher power, belief in that in the kingdom of heaven, but that it's inside us or around us. It's what we create, not what's waiting for us or somewhere, or what someone else has created. And so we've been together for 22 years. Only married for 6 or 7, but we've been together for over 22 years now. So, but I haven't returned to the church. I still don't believe I still cannot believe in in the Jesus Christ story as told in Christianity. And so that doesn't have any meaning for me. But what's weird is that, again, not going to a lot of weddings anymore, going to a lot more funerals. But I understand the ritual more now for some reason. I have more respect for the ritual, and it even in a way just kind of brings me. There's a nostalgia to it that I kind of find somewhat comforting when I'm there. I still remember some of the responses, but and it's okay. I'm okay with it now. It's not like I don't want to be there. It's not like I'm thinking, oh, bullshit. But I still can't recite the Apostles' Creed at the end of the service with everyone else, because there are parts of it most of it that I don't believe. So I'm not going to pretend that I do. Same thing with communion. People say, "You're Catholic, when you go to communion?" I say, I'm not going to go to communion because, one, I don't believe in it. Two, I haven't done what you're supposed to do as a Catholic to receive communion. So I'm not going to. To me, there's still a respect to that. I said, I'm not going to do that because I don't believe in it. Why would I do that? Not out of any holier than thou. It's just for respect for others' beliefs. So I'm not going to stand in line there because that's, I don't know, hypocritical. So, I don't know. There you go. What else?
Well, yeah, and then what happened? It's a good story. This is well told. And so, has your wife's spirituality, I mean, she had that heavy SDA kind of beginnings and stuff like that. Has she kind of adopted some of your... It seemed like you both kind of cooperated there for a while. Is that a process that's kind of evolving there, or you kind of reached a kind of an agreement, or what?
Yeah, no, I think it's pretty much kind of just where it is. And both have kind of the same belief system now, that it's that God as a higher power. That I believe in a higher power, but I believe in a universal power, a universal goodness, a universal entity, something that we all draw either goodness or evil from, and that we have a higher power within us and without us, maybe that helps guide us, or that we can draw guidance from. So whether you call it God or Allah or whatever other words that people use to make it real, I believe in it. I read something not too long ago, but it was about a scientist, and it was an article about how there was arguments with scientists whether science disproves or science refutes God, and this one guy said, how can that be? Science reveals God in just about everything, and I believe that. If you look at the natural world, you say, how could this not be? How could this not have some kind of a divine direction? How can this not have something that is bigger than us? So driving it, creating it. So to me, that I see God in that. But again, whether it's the God in heaven on the throne with the priest sitting at his right side with this, it's like, for me, it doesn't work. That doesn't work. So, and then the other thing I forgot, one thing that I always could never figure out, again, is the Christ story. is what happened from the time he was like 14 to when he was at the marriage.
30.
30. What happened? What happened there during those really formative years of his life? Because there's no documentation. There's no stories. He's 14. He's 30. And it's like, what happened during that time? And I just always come up with the own concept is that this guy was, whoever this guy was, he was real, obviously, because there wouldn't be this giant belief system around him. There wouldn't be all of these writings. This wouldn't have endured all these years if that person and that energy didn't exist. And what happened during the most formative years of a man's life? Where was he? And all I could think of is that he was learning somewhere. He was gone somewhere and was learning somewhere. And again, just from all my little knowledges, my learnings of everything else, and this was never seeking it. I was never seeking enlightenment. I was never seeking some kind of a belief system. It was just that, well, he probably went east. He wouldn't go west. There was no, so he probably went east. And then you start thinking, okay, well, what's to the east? There's the mysticism of the Hindus and the Buddhists, and I start looking at just the basic concepts of that, which I'm not a scholar, so I don't know. And all of a sudden, all that stuff starts to make sense. But there's reincarnation involved in that, and there's all these other concepts. The Nepalese and all that up there. That's all about power from within, and so I'm thinking if he went east and got all that, when he came back, that even makes what he's saying make more sense to me about the kingdom of heaven, about how you're saved yourself, how things, all of those teachings. If you look at them as a from being built on Eastern philosophies, then all of a sudden all that's starting to make sense to me, as far as his teachings go. I think there are a lot of gurus back then, but that Christ is probably the greatest guru the world has known. Or it was documented anyway. And so for me, that's my belief about that. I still believe he was a man. I don't believe he was the Son of God, except in the fact that we're all sons of God. Which again, to me, that makes sense. He's the Son of God. Yeah, so am I. And so, but the Immaculate Conception and the resurrection are just two things that I cannot, will not, I can't accept. Not that I will not accept. It's just I don't find a way to accept it. If I wanted to, I don't find a way. So to me that's why I can't really call myself a Christian if you don't believe in the Christian concepts. But I'm not an agnostic. So I don't know what I am. I defend Christianity. I defend Western religion.
Take a break here, but here's the question you can think about. What is, in your view, at this point in time, what's the meaning of life? Why are we here? What is it? So I'll give you a chance to...
Come on. The meaning of life. Wasn't that a movie? It's a Monty Python movie. What was the song at the end? Always look on the bright side of life. All is for the best in the best of all possible worlds. Always look on the bright side of life. What do you think, Archer?
And actually, I don't mean that as kind of a bullshit question, because, I mean, not the meaning of life, but what is the meaning of your, Joe Scavo, what is your meaning? Number one, is there a meaning?
Yeah. Let you leave it.
And what, as you understand your...
It's a hard question.
It's the question, but it's not an easy one. So, but I'm not saying for us, everybody else to understand this mystery. So, what is in your world, your personhood? What is your meaning, or what is? Do you find a meaning? Are you looking for meaning, or is there no meaning?
Well, I don't know. I don't think I'm really looking for a meaning. It's a hard concept. I don't find a lot of evidence in my personal experience of there being a real purpose to life other than just to live it, to try to live it well, just to try to be nice to people. I mean, really, what is the meaning of life? I think it's just to live it as well as you can. The golden rule. I mean, we've had a couple of conversations, Janet and I, about more than a couple, but about her sister. She has three other siblings, and they've pretty much all of them completely rejected any form of religion or spirituality completely because of their upbringing. And I don't see why, because Janet's not that adamant about it. But we talked about how they just don't even bring up their children with any kind of Christian values, which to me are just like, the Ten Commandments, the Golden Rule. Just be nice to each other. You have to teach people how to be nice. And I think that's the whole meaning of life, is just to try to learn to be a good person. And here's one. It goes way back. Just jump back to me and Janet mentioned this concept from something she had read. And again, it's one of those things I hadn't really realized until then. And it's one of the basic concepts of Catholicism again. And I think Christianity that I don't believe in, because I see the opposite to be true, is that we were all supposed to be born with original sin. And I believe we're all born with original grace. I mean, I don't have children. You've had children. When you've held a baby in your hand, do you see sin there? No, it's grace. It's nothing but grace. So to me, that concept is totally backwards. And so I believe that we all have, goodness in us, and that maybe the meaning of life is just to find out how to use it well. But I don't think we have original sin. So I don't know. That just popped. But that was a concept years ago that Janet brought up, and I went, "God, you're right."
So your best buddy Rick, there, do you ever sit down and have these any religious discussions about any of these things that you're talking about?
Hardly ever. No,
it's not on that.
No, it never. The religion never comes up, and I know. Well, I know that his wife Karen is a good practicing Catholic. I think she goes almost every Sunday, but Rick never is kind of like me in the fact that we just aren't practicing. I don't think I don't know how his acceptance of the beliefs are, and we've never talked about it. That never comes up. We talk about life. We talk about, all the things that happen in people's lives and how do we deal with it and what we find of value, what we value, and what we don't. We have those kind of discussions, but we never have. It's not of a religious nature. Yeah.
What is your view of death, or what do you think about death, or
that would be, again, it's hard. It's kind of fluid, because again, we don't know. You don't know till you get there. And I kind of believe more in, again, in the Eastern philosophy about reincarnation, about about how we know, or science says that energy doesn't die. It only is converted into a different type, and obviously we're an energetic being. As if you see someone alive and someone dead, they understand that spark, that energy is no longer there. So I believe that it's converted, whether that belief, whether that soul, whether that, whatever you want to call it, it's not destroyed. So I believe that it's just converted into, but I don't know what. It's not destroyed. It can't be. Logically it can't be. So it's just converted. But what is the conversion? What is that? Is it enlightenment? Is it an ascendancy to another realm? Is it enlightenment in some other form? Or is it or do you travel to heaven? I don't know. I can't. But I don't have a firm belief on any of them. All I know is that there's something that happens with our bodies, with the soul. I had read an account of a plane crash. I think it was that one, the Iowa cornfield one that everyone's kind of familiar with. It happened a number of years ago, but there was there were many survivors, but I read an account of one of the survivors who had taken his family and pushed them out the emergency exit, and it turned back, and the whole back of the plane was on fire, and the people were in their seats and were literally on fire. Horrific. I mean, just a horrific notion. But he said that he saw columns of light coming out of every one of those people. He saw that before he turned and jumped out. To me, that's the energy. That was their soul. That was their energy. That was the being leaving that body. Where it goes from there, I don't know. But to me, that was a validation of the fact for me that that there is something. So I have a belief system. It's just not one that I can quantify, I guess.
So if you look at yourself now, the person that you are, and what influence of the Catholic teachings, I guess up through grade school and maybe up to Servite, assuming that period of time, what has that given you? What remains, or what was the influence that remains here today?
You're good at this.
This a while.
I guess back to what I said about the discussion I had with Janet about just Christian upbringing, about a basis in living, in how to live your life. I don't have the well, I don't know what the word I want to use, that other Christian sects have against Catholicism. A lot of animosity, that would be a good word. I don't have the animosity to my religion the way others do, because I'm okay. So Martin Luther pounded up his protest. Okay, fine, but that doesn't mean that the values of Catholicism as opposed to Christianity are not valid. I still think that, like anything else, it's just about doing what's right, doing good things, and that's where I am about it now. I don't have any animosity about how I was how we were taught, about the fear-based. For me, how it was fear-based. That was the way it was taught, and that's the way I interpreted it. And I have, I think that all of the basic religions, that if people follow the basic tenets, are going to do good things. So to me, that's what I got out of my early years with it, was just that you have to do the good things. And I have no problem with the Pope. I don't believe anymore that the real infallibility issue with talking to God, but I have no problem with him as the head of the church. I don't agree sometimes with all of the ideas that they have, but those are the church's ideas, and people can choose to follow them or not. And I still think a lot of them are good ones. They're still basically good ideas. They're basically good things that all people should be able to follow. And so that's what I got. I'm not a bad person, and I'm not a bad person, I think, because of part of my upbringing, and that part of that, a big part of that was the Catholic upbringing. So I know right from wrong. I don't think some people do, really, but we were taught right from wrong. So maybe that's the best part. What?
Your turn.
Yeah, my turn was what do you mean you've been doing this for a long time?
I've been interviewing these people
okay.
for I've done probably like 15 of these, and I think these things. We talk. My
Yeah.
wife and I have these discussions pretty much every day of the week. So, and it's funny you were saying about those years of Jesus. What happened between? I don't think anybody really knows, but there's some theories about that. And actually, Maria is the one that's kind of reading into this thing. One of the theories is there was a sect of desert hermits, the Essenes. And actually, the Dead Sea Scrolls, that they found these like in the 40s, and there were all these scriptures, and they were by this kind of hermits that lived in the desert. And I think John the Baptist was
one of them.
And so one theory was that that's where he went. He which makes sense because he read the scriptures. How could he wouldn't have learned to read? When he went to the temple and he was discussing what things there. How he wouldn't have learned that as a carpenter in Nazareth.
Right.
And so they think that that could be an explanation where he learned to read.
Yeah.
So that's I guess, and that's East.
Yeah.
But when you said East and Buddhism, there's another story, and people that write this and believe this, and it's one of these mystery things that he there's the Silk Road is the path, the trade path that goes all the way to China, and they are in Tibet, in the mountains and the monasteries up there. There was some European guy that I don't know this, and my wife is reading these things, so you have to take all of this with a grain of this is not, but. That the story is that there's European kind of philosopher, religious kind of guy went to Tibet and started searching these things out, and then apparently, I believe this to be a fact because of other people, that there were stories among the villages about this guy named Jesu or something, something kind of like that, and that he was taught and was basically taught against the caste system. And basically was stood up for the every common person was as good as anybody else, and that kind of got him in trouble with the the Pharisees of their side.
Right.
So he got kicked out of it, and that there's in the monasteries there's actually some writings, and if you go in there and say, hey, do you have this? No, we don't have it. We never heard that. But if you kind of gain their trust, this philosopher guy in particular was able to actually kind of research that, and there was this semi-legend that Jesus studied, so he did, it's kind of that's interesting that you would say that. So whether it's true or not, who knows? But as you say, the similarities between Buddhist and Hindu, the Eastern thought, is pretty perceptive. I think that you can kind of see that's, and that whole kingdom of God being inside. My wife just finally got this after how many years? They said, Dave, she says, I really don't. I used to think when they said kingdom of God, they were talking about heaven up above. He says, no, if you read what he's talking about, the kingdom of God is here. We create the kingdom of God on earth. We are earth. The kingdom of God. We are the, and inside. And so, so.
It's not the Vatican,
right.
Isn't the kingdom of heaven on earth, but that's how, to me, people believe that because, again, that was their belief systems at the time. And again, if you look, what that one course that Duplessis taught send me on a different path. It was a path of trying of seeking knowledge, but it wasn't the path I think he was trying to send everyone on. It was a totally different path for me, but I kept looking at things differently because of that. And any time I'd hear something, I remember for a while there, I was on Sundays, I was turning on TV and watching one of the the religious programs. It was this guy that was preaching, a black preacher in L.A., and it was Bible study, and he would say things, and then I would go, yeah, but in my own mind, that's the literal interpretation of it, and then it would just roll around in my head, and I think, well, that's how someone 2,000 years ago was thinking about it, but that isn't it. That's only because that's the only concept they had. I'd read somewhere else about the concept of consciousness, and they're trying to trace a whole idea of consciousness back through the centuries, and how people, the teachings or writings where people had visions. They're saying those weren't visions; that wasn't a vision from somewhere else. Someone didn't appear in them, but that was the only way they could describe it. It was inside.
Thoughts.
There was their thoughts. They were finally being able to put those thoughts create concepts from those thoughts. And so, again, that makes sense to me. Okay, so maybe God didn't appear to Abraham as a burning bush, or whatever that. I don't know how accurate I am with that stuff. Maybe that really didn't happen like that. It was but he had a real aha moment, and the only way he could describe it, the only way he could make it real to himself, was to somehow put some kind of a tangible event to it. Another thing I remember I read a number of years ago was a book about Christopher Columbus, but it wasn't about. It was about his son. It was a writing. His son accompanied him on several journeys, and kept a diary and a log. And I was reading some of those, and they talked about about concepts, about reality, about perception, and how even then they were just finally starting to realize, Christopher Columbus' son and those people, about what is perception, what is reality, perception of reality. And they were trying to tell the Indians, because the Indians wanted to know where they'd come from. Because as far as they were concerned, they just showed up on shore. They said, well, how did you get here? And they said, well, they crossed the ocean. Well, how would you cross the ocean? He goes, well, we came in those ships. And they said, what ships? And they had the ships out in the harbor, anchored in the harbor. And from what he's saying, the Indians could not see them, because it was beyond their concept of reality. They had to say, well, don't you see them? And then no. They said, well, do you see that tree out there in the water? Oh, and it wasn't until they could get something from their own perception that they actually, as from this account, were able to, those Indians, these natives were able to see those ships out there, because they were completely beyond their perception of reality. So what is reality? What is our perception of reality? How do you align that with what people's beliefs about visions, about miracles? How does all that fit? What about UFOs? What about little green people? All of that stuff. People swear it happens. Where is that? Maybe they're seeing what we don't. Maybe we're the ones that don't have the vision. They do. All of this stuff, to me, it is all part of spirituality, all part about how people understand religion, especially back in the Old Testament and even in the New Testament. Did what's his name actually get hit by lightning? I don't know. Did he fall off his horse? Janet's belief, the SDA, they have a prophet, a woman. She got, I don't know if that's the right one, or there's another one. Got kicked in the head by a horse and started spouting stuff. Everybody believed her back in the 1800s. Really? Whose perception is that? Did she really get? Is that what happened? So I have more questions than answers, obviously. And for me, that's more. I don't have a belief. I have a question of beliefs, I guess, is what it is. I can get worked up about some of this sometimes.
Talking about the scripture, the literal thing, Thomas Jefferson like most of those guys, was a deist. He wasn't like the conservative right wing Republicans want to paint all these founding fathers as these Bible reading.
Right. Yeah.
Well, it wasn't that way. They basically believed in God as the watchmaker, then created things, set things in motion. There was a God, but he wasn't really involved in it. And this whole miraculous, same thing. Thomas Jefferson actually had back before he had word processing, he had his own Bible, and he cut all the miraculous things out and just put it away. He boiled it down to, it's about 1/3 the length of the normal New Testament. It had Jesus' teaching, behold the lilies of the field, God will provide for you. All these teaching things, and then they get away. It limited all the walking on water and the resurrection. And the Immaculate Conception really isn't in the Bible. That's kind of a Catholic interpretation of the angel appearing, and it's only the Catholic. So that's one thing, is that there are people that just kind of boil it down to the teaching part of it and just set those aside. The other thing is this whole literalist trend where the Bible is a literal word. He said it, I believe it. That's very recent. That started like in the 1800s. It was not part of, certainly wasn't part of Catholicism ever, and it was a Protestant thing, but very late on the scene, and mostly in the United States. And so, if you look at the Jewish approach to Scripture, I love it. They have the Talmud, which is a series of writings. They have all these scholars and people, and they argue every. So Abraham and Sarah. Say Abraham was a really old guy, and Sarah like that. Maybe that means that God's no, and the other guy says no, that's a sign. And so they're writing all these things. They have this argument, this very Jewish argument about what the Scriptures meant, and the concept is every generation interprets things according to what they know, and they comment on it, and there's truth to be learned all through the generations, and it changes a lot according to what the times are. And there was a time, these are teaching stories, not literal truth.
Right.
And the whole point is and so they massage these things generation after generation, and I think that's what the Catholics actually do, is that it's not a literal truth, and so.
Well, to me, but at St. Justin, the way they were portrayed and the way they were taught is they were literal truths.
I think that's true on kind of a certain level, and maybe a parish level. And if you're converting the Indians and the natives and stuff, you got to keep it simple. And so, I mean, it's incredible to me that you got penance as a fourth grader for, or I guess it's a little bit older when you a question. I mean, who would handle that these days? I mean, who in their right mind would, that's crazy the way, that was all they knew. But that's just a certain time and place and a certain narrow, in this case, Irish maybe kind of thing. That's not...
I don't, and even all those things that I talked about, I understand them not to be evil spirited or anything. It's just that was how they knew how to handle that. That's how they were taught, either taught to handle it or they had been taught that same way themselves. So, as far as that happening, I was surprised, but
there's an awful lot of depth to the Scriptures, and you can interpret them all different. You can read them all different ways, and it's surprising. Sometimes your head just kind of turns around and said, I always like the kingdom of God. And I always thought it was up there. And I think in approaching Scriptures with that open-mindedness, I think it can lead to some really, really, and if you take it literally, you miss the true meaning. And I think for convenience, the Catholic Church has to boil it down to the least common denominator. But like in Catholic colleges and Catholic theologians and people that this is they know the nuances, but but I think the Pope and the Bishop says let's not confuse people. Let's not make there's theologians, lots of theologians out there that think this whole infallibility thing is like same as you think, and the same with the Immaculate Conception. There's even the Catholic theologians that really question what is the resurrection. What I mean, was it what happened? Was, and so. But I think to keep things simple, they kind of dumb it down, and that's where But I think there's a lot of freedom. There should be a lot of freedom, and you have a highly developed thought. You've thought this through more than most. See, there's different stories in this whole thing, and there's people that pretty much start where they are and end the same way they are. Nothing has changed, and those are the hardest stories to listen to because there's no story there really. And there's some people that have radical changes because of life circumstances, and in your case, it's just a kind of a thought process, and it makes sense. I mean,
Well, that there's just so many questions about it in the 20th century, with the wars that happened, with the Holocaust, with the evil that was present in Europe and in Asia in the 40s. If you say, well, some people would say, well, that was God's will. Well, how can that be God's will? And there are others that say, that go from a completely different philosophy of everything we do is we create our own reality. And it's then, okay, then why would the Jews create that reality for themselves? Why would all the victims in China, why are they creating that? How can they create that reality for themselves if we're all responsible for our own lives and what happens to them because of our belief systems or whatever? How can that many people all believe the same things and bring that kind of doom on themselves? That doesn't make sense. But either to me does the whole concept of that was God's will. So all I'm left with for me is questions. There's no answers. There are no answers for that. I don't see any belief that answers any of the questions. So for me, a lot of it is just a giant question mark.
See, that's the problem of evil. That's the thing that you're thinking. It's the problem of evil. Everybody struggles with that. I mean, everybody struggles with that. Why, if there is a God, if He is good, why is there evil? Did He permit evil to? Kind of the quick answer is that He wanted man to have a choice,
right?
Free will.
It's the concept of free will.
And that whole thing about original sin. That was brilliant, the way you put it. And there was a book by a Dominican. It's called Original Blessings. And what was the title? But he was a Catholic theologian, Dominican, got kicked out. Actually, he quit. He quit because they were coming after him. But he said, it's exactly what you said. It was that same concept that. And that came in later on. You won't read about original sin in the Bible. You'll read about Adam and Eve, but it was about 300 years later that Saint Augustine kind of brought up that whole thing about the child has got this human defect that kind of and so that's things that are kind of like the Immaculate Conception. After the fact, they say, "Boy, it kind of we notice that these." People do bad things. People. Here's this really innocent child like that, and yet if you leave them alone, or even if you give them good, by the time they're 8 or 9 years old, they're doing what you did at school.
Right.
And so that problem of why does problem of evil? Why do people do bad things? And that was one intellectual concept of trying to explain that away. That original, we have something, a defect. We have this you can call it just a tendency to screw up. I mean, that's pretty clear. We all know that exists. Original sin it can be simply, but the Catholics have to kind of build this whole edifice, and then if there's original sin, then we need to have purgatory. We have purgatory, but people that are bad, we got to have a limbo. And so we got souls in purgatory, and so we've got to pray, and we can pray. And they said that what sins you. Forgive and whatever. And so the Pope's got this treasury of merit there. So this big edifice that they build on these quotes, and and that's what I think. That's what you kind of perceive. Is that wait a minute. This doesn't make sense.
As a concept, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense because, again, it's just empirical data. When you have a newborn and you hold a newborn child, there is no evil there. There cannot be any. So as far as original built into that child from whatever. Um, so that whole concept is just, to me, is, it's completely upside down. But I understand with Catholicism as opposed to just Christianity, is that they had a really large base of followers that they had to manage back in those early centuries, and they had to come up with ways to manage those people, and I don't believe to manipulate in selfish or evil ways, but just to manage them. We have to manage this belief system, and how do we do that? And part of it was having the holidays on the same dates as pagan holidays or local holidays, so it made sense to people. It's coming up with all those concepts and then the explanations for them about original sin, about heaven and hell, and like I said, limbo, and all those things. Those are all concepts from an institution that had to manage this ever growing base of followers, and I think any viewpoint, you have to, that's how it works. Of course, it kind of got out of hand with the Spanish Inquisition, but how the Catholic Church would create, beliefs or tenets, and then if you didn't believe them, you're a heretic. Okay. Again, that's trying to manage the base, because you can't let this, at least from my viewpoint, you can't let this idea take hold, because then we can't manage everyone. Again, we don't want to lose these people to this belief, so you have to create, fear, heresy, yeah, and Galileo, the whole concept with Galileo and Copernicus. So, I read a great book called Galileo's Daughter, and it's the writings, some of the letters are his to her, but more of them are from her to him. He couldn't keep her for whatever. I can't remember the setup now, but he placed her in a convent when she was like, I don't know, 4 years old or something. So she lived in a convent her entire life. But they had this conversation back and forth, and he follows the life of Galileo, and then with the teachings and beliefs from the letters. And it's really interesting about religion back in, when was that, 1500s, 1400s?
I think it was in the
1600s.
So were the actual letters that went back, or is this a novel where they kind of made it up, kind of thing?
Well, it kind of, the letters are there. The letters are quoted in the book.
Okay, so it's actually historical letters that are being, they're not. Right.
Yeah. Okay. So the whole thing, and plus whatever his teachings, whatever the documents that existed at the time about his life and where he was, and the problems he had with the Vatican and with the Pope, and because of his beliefs of the earth, and because I guess it all was based on one passage during a battle when God saved whoever was fighting, and talked about the sun crossing the sky during the battle, and that proved that to them that the sun revolved around us.
I think that what the quote was, that God made the sun stand still.
Yeah, maybe that was it. Yeah,
So, and so that was exactly,
So that was the fact so then that proved that the sun revolved around the earth, not the other way around. And since you're refuting scripture, that's heresy. And it's like, okay, wait a minute, but yeah. It's just all of those things for me with the Catholic Church that still in the back of my mind, if I'm standing in the church and there's a power of the centuries behind it, but to me there's also I don't want to say falsehood, but there's manipulation of the centuries that follows that too for me. So, I don't know if that makes how that makes sense, but now it's my turn to use that.
Yeah.
And I have to apologize. I didn't offer you anything to drink because we basically don't have anything in this house except right now except water. No orange juice. No, I can't even make you a Bloody Mary.
I had my coffee.
That's what I'm getting rid of mine. Okay, what was I going to? Oh, for me, to see that the fact that that your belief was such a big and normal part of your life. To me, that I find that I find that remarkable, because I didn't have that. I never thought that as being normal. I thought more of my belief system being normal. So to hear that. And I know of other people that have been that, but I kind of just ignored it. But the fact that now getting older and starting to look at things like that, to me, that still seems remarkable that you had that faith and lived that in that all these years. I just don't. I can't. That doesn't make any sense to me.
And likewise, for me.
Uh-huh.
I'm the fish in the water looking at yours. How in the world could you live your life and not have that beliefs? You know that.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. We're different planets like that. But the beauty of it exists.
Mm-hmm.
Your world exists. My world exists, and it's okay.
Yeah.
And there's. I thought every family was like mine.
Mm-hmm.
And we were surrounded by people that were very much like ours, but that's not the world. And more we see kids come home with our kids, and you look at kind of how there's all different stories out there.
Yeah. See, and I have no problem with your story. I really respect the fact that this is how you believe and this is how you've lived your life. I love that. What I have a problem with more than anything else is like one of Janet's siblings who has like this vehement disdain for a family like you. It's not. I don't know if it's hate. It's disdain more than anything. It's almost like an elitism. I have a colleague that I work with off and on who's is a militant socialist liberal. He's the one that gives a lot of people a bad name. He's just militant socialist, and he has the same disdain for religion and for people who believe in religion. He would believe that you are like are a simpleton because of that, and that you would just find that kind of solace in religion, almost like the I don't know, I can't remember if it was Marx or Lenin about religion is the opium of the masses. And the disdain involved in that. When I think that religion, okay, yeah, sure, why can't it be the opium of the masses? It brings comfort to people when they need it. It brings a sense of safety to people when they need it. Religion creates a community of people that believe the same and that look out and care for each other. Okay, I think that's a really good thing. But this kind of militant socialism, they think that's the root of all evils is religion and belief in religion and God and all that.
My youngest son was kind of going that direction. Danny was, I think what year it is, maybe in 8th grade and freshman year in high school. He's very negative, hanging out with some kids that were doing this.
Yeah.
And, he would have that same attitude towards. I think religious groups particularly. And at one time I sat down and had a talk with him and said, Danny, I said, find out the truth, but don't hate. Don't. Everybody does the best they can with what they've got, and you have to see it from within their perspective. Have the respect for those people to allow them to have their thoughts, and don't think you are. Just be respectful
Right.
people's beliefs, and it changed. It actually was
Yeah.
something that kind of flipped the switch, and
Made them think about it a little differently.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, you know, I think it's normal too, though, for young people to reject at some point the teachings of their parents. You know, we all have this. I think there's that rebellion, and I've told people this for many years. It says that every year I got older, my dad got smarter. Once I became an adult, you know, I thought that when I was in high school and all that stuff, that his concept of life and everything was so outdated and so wrong, and just didn't know anything about life or about me or anything. And since when I got out in the world, every year my dad got smarter. I realized that what he was saying, everything was actually had a lot more value to it than what my beliefs were. But okay, I had an idea, I had a thought, and I lost it. Oh, I have because we're just kind of bouncing around right now. But my good friend, who's also a cousin, he's 4 years younger than me, 3 years younger than me. We kind of grew up together. Both lived in Anaheim, but he was across the street, so he was in a different parish. He wasn't in St. Justin. And they had 4 kids, not 2, and his dad couldn't afford to send the kids to Catholic school, so they went to public school and had catechism, whatever. And I guess that was on Saturdays, I don't know, because I went to Catholic school, so I didn't have to do catechism. Then they were raised Catholic, but they all kind of went their own ways. And my cousin John kind of did the same thing I did, which was just drop it. He just dropped religion and spirituality for a while. Well, he's back in a big way. This happened, I don't know, it's been happening for 7, 8 years maybe, but in the last 5 years, and he has 2 kids, twins, especially for them. So it's been maybe 10 years. He became kind of a Christian fundamentalist. He started going to a church there that is pretty fundamental when we start talking about it. We try not to talk religion and politics, obviously. But he has definitely gone more of in that fundamental viewpoint where if it's not in the Bible, it doesn't exist. And what is in the Bible is the truth, and the hard and fast truth. And I know for him, though, obviously has to have some kind of problems because he's not living. I mean, he's a good guy, but by what you would fundamentalist teachings, he's not being a true Christian. He's accepted Jesus Christ as his Lord and Savior, which again I have a problem with because I don't believe in the thing that they do. But what's really interesting is in the last few years he's met a woman who is a practicing Catholic. So again, we're kind of, Jen and I've talked about this, is how are they reconciling these two beliefs? And I think pretty much just by not talking about it. I don't know.
Well, that's a good idea. That'll work. That's a good idea.
Really well.
I'll have to try that one. Don't talk.
But she goes to church. She goes to Mass every Sunday, and comes from a large, devout Catholic family. And he rejected religion for quite a few years, and like I said, and now he's not a, these guys that are he's not a, what do they call it? He doesn't witness, he doesn't preach about it, but every once in a while something will come up, and we can see we're at odds, obviously, about our beliefs.
Well, if there can be respect, has to be respect.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and there can be in a situation. There's lots of marriages where people have radically different belief systems, and as long as they agree to respect each other and each other's beliefs, that works. And just your respect shows through in what you say toward, and that's a beautiful thing. I mean, I have a lot of respect for that. So, but yeah, it's there's no absolutism. That this is absolutely...
Well, that's how you think, and that's obviously how I think, but that's not how Christian fundamentalists think, and that's not how radical Muslims think.
Right.
So there's a couple pretty hardcore religions still still at battle. And just here in the United States, these there are Christian radicals that are just as dangerous, I think, as these Islamic radicals. We're just not really going out
and Jewish as well.
Kill people.
There's hardcore Jewish.
Oh yeah, real hardcore. Yeah.
That's the true believers.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess there's a part of me that always thinks that, but I think it's always the grass is greener on the other side. That kind of wishes that I had your belief, or that I'd had your just that core belief that to me gives a sense of security and purpose. That I wish I'd had that, but then at the same time it's like that was offered to me, but I rejected it. So for whatever reason, I just couldn't believe it. And
but you know what I would say to that, and my wife is like this too, because my wife is kind of, her patron saint is Doubting Thomas.
That would be nice.
And she says, I'm doubting Thomas, and that's good. I mean, he's just being honest. He's saying, I didn't see Jesus. I got to see it. I got to put my hand here. I got to do this. You can't convince me.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing evil in that. It's just he just doesn't have that tool, and got what Jesus. I mean, the solution for that, Jesus says, here I am, touch and feel.
Mm-hmm.
And Maria says the same thing. She says, I don't want to be a bad Catholic by asking all these questions. I said, the one she can't really understand is, why did Jesus have to die? Why did he have to atone for people? So what, and so, and she says, but, it says, all I'm asking God is just tell me the answer. I'm just asking the question. I'm not trying to be...
Yeah, where's that answer?
I'm not trying to be skeptical. I'm not trying to be evil. I just tell me. I just want to know the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And just if there is a truth, and let me know. And if there isn't, she, she has a love of Jesus. As a personal, that which
mm-hmm.
is. But I think that you can't be criticized if you say, I just can't believe this. I don't
mm-hmm.
see that as wrongdoing. I don't see that as, it's just, show me that. Show me, and when you show me, then I'll believe. But until that time, it's not that I refuse to believe. It's just mm-hmm. I can't, like you say, and I don't. And
I don't want to. I don't espouse my beliefs or lack of beliefs to people a lot, because I don't want to disrespect their belief system. And I, like I say, I know like guys like this guy I know, that he could care less. If anybody that's going to go, he would just say right to, that's bullshit. He's the kind of guy that doesn't care about that. But I respect other people's beliefs. I respect other people's the way they want to live, as long as they're not trying to control the way I live. They can try to influence it if they want by telling me things, but
it's respect.
It's a respect.
And a person, and a lot of it's bitterness. It's a lot of it's bitterness, and who knows what they went through that gave them that bitterness. But
there's one thing more. And again, no disrespect to anybody, but the whole. I'll tell you the concept of with Christ, and especially with the resurrection and all of that, rising from the dead, ascending into heaven. To me, if I look at a logical, secular viewpoint about it, I look at that story as kind of a PR move. I look at that as spinning, as a PR spin on a bad result, which is the fact that this leader, this guru, this very charismatic, well-meaning person who has all these teachings that ring very true, that the worst thing that could have possibly happened. They got him and they killed him. And his followers who put everything, they've sacrificed everything into this. and truly believe in him and believe in those teachings and all of that wrapped up in that. They don't want this to die. They don't want this movement to die. They don't want this to stop here with his death. So they come up with a story. And to me, I think that's the only thing that makes any sense to me, because you can't really tell me that unless you're trying to make up this story that this happened, that 3 days later he rose from the dead, and then they watched him ascend into heaven. I mean, really? It's the only reason they could come up with that kind of a story is because they needed to perpetuate the Christ mythology, so that they didn't lose their followers, that they didn't lose their base of supporters. So that's, to me, that's what makes sense. It's like a little kid when you get caught with something, they make up a story. I know it was, to me, it's kind of the same thing.
Working backwards.
Yeah, yeah. So, and again, I don't say that to many people because it's heretical in nature to people's beliefs about Christianity. So I don't say it, but I feel safe in saying that to you here.
There's a respect.
But that's about
there's a respect.
That's about the only person I think I ever told that to was Janet.
I think that's a good observation. I mean,
anyway.
It certainly fits the fact, and you've got a good mind.
Anyway,
and a good heart.
Well.
And that's the neat thing, is that there's so many people that are just good people, and we get in our Catholic ghetto or Jewish ghetto or Muslim ghetto, and we think the only good people are the people that are in that little group, and it's good to. I think these really powerful things happen when Jews and Muslims and Christians have to work together on something, and that respect, I think, comes from God. I mean, that's the basic message. It's love.
That's true. Yeah, you're right. Yeah,
and so that's the big disconnect when you see somebody who is a Christian that supposes it's about love doing things that sure sound like bitterness and hate. The whole love the sinner but hate the sin thing doesn't make an awful lot of sense.
No, especially when they're condemning that when they're condemning the sinner. It's this whole idea of that because what you did, you're going to hell.
In a way, I feel sorry for these people that think to be faithful to God, they have to think these thoughts. And they're doing it out of what I don't think people really want. I think a lot of right-wing Christians really want to like and love the people on the margins and stuff. And I think they feel compelled not to
because of their
and it kind of great. So there's something that was my kind of turning point. Still working it through.